I was 3 hours into pulling rotten siding off the east wall of a heritage house on Yonge Street. SUV parked behind my truck and didn't move. I noticed it the way you notice anything that doesn't belong. Not with alarm, just a register. My hands were on a pry bar, my knees were on scaffolding, and the October air in Kingston was doing that thing where it can't decide if it wants to rain, or just threaten to, all day. The SUV sat with the engine running. I went back to the siding. The wall was in worse shape than the inspection report had suggested. Original clapboard, under 2 layers of vinyl, and under that, water damage going back years. The kind of thing that happens when people care more about what a house looks like from the street than what it's doing behind its own skin. I had seen it 100 times. You peel back the easy part and find the honest part underneath. I was working the next, board loose when the driver's door opened. The woman who stepped out was wearing a charcoal coat, good boots, and the expression of someone who had made 3 phone calls in the car before deciding to get out. She was maybe early 40s. The kind of put together that took effort but looked effortless. She stood at the edge of the walkway and looked at the house, then at the scaffolding, then up at me. "You the one running this job?" "Depends what you want," I said. "Are you Kieran Marsh?" I set the pry bar across the plank. "Yeah." She didn't introduce herself right away. She looked at the house again, the way people sometimes do when they're actually seeing something rather than just looking at it. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a card, not handing it to me, just holding it. "My name is Sylvie Beaumont. I need to talk to you about something that has nothing to do with siding." I climbed down 2 rungs. I figured. She waited until I was at eye level. Sylvie Beaumont was a name I knew, not personally. I didn't run in those circles. But in Kingston, in the heritage preservation world, in the kind of meetings where someone argues for 2 hours about mortar composition, you heard Beaumont. Her family had owned the Beaumont Arms since the 1930s. A limestone inn on the edge of downtown. 3 stories. Wraparound porch. The kind of place that showed up on tourism brochures between the waterfront and the courthouse. They also owned 2 smaller properties along Princess Street that had been in the family long enough to be on the heritage register. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "What can I do for Beaumont Properties?" She looked at me directly. "I need a fiancé by Friday." Behind me, my apprentice Hugo dropped something metal inside the house. I did not move. "I'm a contractor," I said. "I know what you are. I spent 2 weeks finding you." "Then you know I fix buildings. I don't do whatever this is." "I know." She folded the card back into her pocket. "I need someone who isn't already connected to my family's business. Someone my uncle can't pressure or buy or call in a favor with. Someone who has a reason to care about the properties themselves, not just the money attached to them." I looked at her for a long second. "Why would I care about your family's property?" Because 4 months ago, my uncle tried to acquire your grandfather's house on Berry Street through a numbered company. You turned it down." I came the rest of the way down the ladder. It had been a strange offer. Too high, too fast, no clear buyer. My grandfather had built that house in 1962. He had put the floors down himself and the windows in himself. And he had died in the bedroom at the back of it. I had been renting it out since his estate settled, but I wasn't selling it. Not to a number on a piece of paper. That was him. Yes. He offered a lot. That usually gets people. Not for that house. She nodded like she had expected that answer. "My uncle's name is Raymond Beaumont. He's been quietly positioning to take over majority voting control of Beaumont Properties. Since my father went into palliative care last spring, there's a clause in our family trust. Very old. Written by my grandfather, who was not a subtle man, that grants a surviving unmarried heir provisional control at 30 days, unless they are legally partnered. My father is still alive, but he can't exercise his role anymore. Raymond's lawyers found the clause 6 weeks ago. I leaned against the truck. You have your own lawyers. 4 of them. They told me the clause is valid. Provincial court agreed last week. So marry someone. I've been trying. Raymond has been thorough. My ex-husband is not an option. My colleagues are either too easy to discredit or too connected to Beaumont business. My friends are the same. She paused. You said no to Raymond when money should have been enough. That made you interesting. I dug deeper. You've turned down 3 other development offers on properties you manage for other clients. Because you didn't agree with what the buyers planned to do with them. You refused a job last year because the owner wanted to gut a century home for open concept. Square footage. I stared at her. You went through my files, public records, and your reputation. I didn't trespass. You know my business better than some of my clients do. I had to make sure. Sure of what? That you weren't someone Raymond could get to after the fact. He'll try. He'll look for leverage. If you have a price, he'll find it eventually. I looked past her at the SUV. The window was up. I looked back at her. So I'm useful because I'm stubborn. You're useful because you understand what it means when something irreplaceable gets torn down and replaced with something cheaper. That landed. I didn't like that it landed. What do I get? I asked. A flat fee in trust before anything is signed. Legal protection drafted by independent counsel. Clean dissolution terms with no claim on your company, your truck, your grandfather's house, or anything you built before or during this. You walk away whole. You didn't answer my question. She looked at me steadily. What do you want? The truth, I said. All of it. What Raymond actually wants to do with those buildings. What your father would say about this if he could say anything. Every detail you left out because you thought it might make me say no. She was quiet for a moment. The wind came off the lake and moved through the half-stripped wall behind us. My father restored the Beaumont Arms himself in 1987, she said. He spent 14 months. He slept there sometimes because he didn't want to leave the job half done. He told me once that the limestone breathes if you let it. Raymond hasn't set foot in that building in 11 years. To him, it's inventory. To Raymond, everything is inventory. She stopped. The 2 properties on Princess Street have sitting tenants. A bookshop that's been there since 1994 and a music school that moved in 12 years ago. Raymond has letters of intent from a developer to gut both floors and put in short-term rentals. The letters are dated before my father got sick. He's been planning this. I looked at the house I was supposed to be fixing. Old siding, honest walls. The work that needed doing, whether anyone was watching or not. You understand this pulls my name into your family situation? Yes. My crew? Yes. My clients will ask questions. My supplier, people I've worked with for years. Yes. And if this falls apart, people won't say you picked me because I was the right choice. They'll say you bought the nearest warm body. Her jaw tightened once. I know that. I watched her for another beat. She had not stepped back from any of it. All right, I said. She blinked. I'll hear the rest. And if I say yes, I have one condition. What condition? Before we sign anything, before we go anywhere near a government office, you come to my shop. You see who this touches. My crew has families. Hugo in there has a kid starting college in September. If Raymond comes after me, he comes after all of them. Sylvie looked at the house, then at her boots, then back at me. When? Now. She nodded. All right, from inside the wall, Hugo called out, Kieran, the header above the window is soft. I'll be right there. I called back. Then to Sylvie. 20 minutes. She looked at my truck, then at me, dusty jacket, paint on my forearms, sawdust in my hair. Fine, my shop's on Division Street. Follow the truck. 20 minutes earlier my biggest problem had been a wet header and a tight deadline. Now I had a Beaumont standing in my work zone asking me to get engaged by Friday. And for reasons I didn't fully trust yet, I had not said no. My shop sat on a narrow lot off Division. A low, concrete block building I had bought from a retiring electrician 7 years ago, and slowly turned into something that worked. Outside, a stack of salvaged doors, 3 limestone window surrounds I'd pulled from a demo site in Napanee, and a half-finished sign I kept meaning to finish. Inside, the smell of sawdust and oil, and the kind of quiet that meant people were concentrating. Mal came out of the finishing room when she heard the truck. She was 53, had been doing this kind of work since before I was licensed, and had the exact expression of someone who was deciding in real time whether to be amused or worried. She looked at the silver SUV behind my truck. She looked at Sylvie. She looked at me. We being inspected? Not exactly, I said. Mal, this is Sylvie Beaumont. Mal's face didn't change. The Inn family. Yes, Sylvie said. You in some kind of trouble? Sylvie paused. Yes. Mal looked at her for a long moment with the kind of directness that had nothing to do with being rude. She was just deciding something. Then Kieran will help, she said, and went back inside. Sylvie watched her go. I saw her take it in. No contract, no family name, no pitch. Just a woman asking the one question that mattered and giving a straight answer. I walked Sylvie through the shop quickly. Hugo was on the phone in the corner. Pete was running the planer in the back, which meant the radio was off and the whole building smelled like fresh pine. There were drawings pinned above the metal cabinet, a quote sheet under a coffee mug, boots lined up by the side door. These are the people Raymond hits if he comes after me, I said. Mal's been with me 6 years. Pete has 2 more years on his mortgage. Hugo's learning on this job, which means if the business gets complicated, he's the first one who can't finish what he started. I understand, Sylvie said. You're starting to. She didn't argue. That meant something. At 11, I was in a small office above a title company on Ontario Street, with a lawyer named Miss Park, who had been recommended by someone Sylvie had never worked with before, specifically so she'd have no reason to bend toward Beaumont interests. Miss Park read every page twice and asked questions I hadn't thought to ask. Sylvie waited outside the frosted glass and did not call anyone while I was in there. You understand this is not a standard arrangement, Miss Park said. I got that. You also understand that it is legal if entered knowingly and voluntarily. Yes. She looked at my hands. The kind of look that takes stock without being unkind. The dissolution terms are clean. Your assets are ring-fenced completely. The fee is held in trust by a third party, not Beaumont's lawyers. She thought of that? She specified it. I looked out the window at the street below. October light on limestone buildings. The kind of city that had been built to last, and sometimes got the chance to. By noon we were at a Service Ontario office on Barrack Street. No flowers. No witness I had known for more than 3 hours. Just Sylvie, me, the documents, and a registrar who looked like she had seen stranger things, but was not going to say so. The rings were the problem. Sylvie's lawyer, a man named Bernard, who had the efficient energy of someone permanently 3 tasks ahead, leaned over and said something I didn't catch. I didn't have time to arrange anything, Sylvie said quietly. I reached into my jacket pocket. I had almost not taken it. I kept it in the top drawer of my workbench most days, next to a stub of carpenter's pencil and a receipt for sandpaper. My grandfather's ring, plain silver, worn flat on the bottom from 51 years of daily wear. I had taken it out of the drawer that morning and put it in my pocket for no reason I could explain at the time. We can use this, I said. For today. You can give it back after. Sylvie looked at it in my palm. Her expression did something I wasn't expecting. Not gratitude exactly, something quieter than that. She slid it onto my finger. Her hand wasn't completely steady. I noticed that. I didn't say anything about it. By 4 o'clock we were in a boardroom in a law firm downtown that had the specific smell of expensive paper and old money. Raymond Beaumont was already at the table. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, and had the kind of smile that came pre-installed. He looked at me, The way people sometimes look at hardware that wasn't specified in the plans. Not hostile exactly, just assessing whether it was load-bearing. Sylvie, he said, this is creative, even for you. She placed the registration certificate on the table. The clause is satisfied. Raymond laughed softly. You married a trades guy this morning? Restoration contractor, I said. The room got quiet. Raymond looked at me directly for the first time. I'm sorry? Restoration contractor, I said again. If you're going to have an opinion about me, use the full description. Beside me, I heard Bernard inhale. One of the older people at the table, a woman named Mrs. Tremblay, who was the independent trustee, and had said nothing since we walked in, looked down at her hands like she was hiding a smile. Raymond settled back. And what exactly did she promise you, Mr. Marsh? Nothing that would mean anything to you. Money works for most people. Ach, then you probably find people easy to understand. Sylvie shifted in her seat, not visibly, just enough that I felt it. Raymond leaned forward slightly. You expect this board to believe this is legitimate. I don't expect you to believe anything, I said. That sounds like Mrs. Tremblay's job. Bernard stepped in cleanly and laid out the documentation. Registration, timeline, independent counsel, Miss Park's verification letter. Mrs. Tremblay read everything with a slowness that felt intentional. Raymond watched Sylvie the whole time. You've made this family look chaotic, he said. Sylvie's voice didn't waver. No, I kept you from liquidating 2 heritage properties and displacing tenants who have been there for 30 years, before the end of the fiscal quarter. That landed on the room like a door shutting. Mrs. Tremblay folded her papers. The clause has been satisfied. Provisional control remains with Sylvie Beaumont. Raymond stood and buttoned his jacket and looked at me with the patience of someone who planned to revisit this later. Enjoy the honeymoon. I met his eyes. Enjoy the loss. Sylvie caught my sleeve under the table before I could add to it. Raymond left. The room did not relax exactly, but it exhaled. I thought we had 5 minutes of clear air. Then Sylvie's phone lit up. Then Bernard's. Mrs. Tremblay's assistant came in through the side door pale-faced and handed her a tablet. Sylvie turned her phone toward me. A local news site. A story with my name in it and hers in larger text. Beaumont heirs rushed marriage raises fraud allegations from family source. Raymond, I said. Already, she said. Through the boardroom windows, I could see someone with a camera on the sidewalk below. Sylvie's driver called. Reporters outside her building on King Street. 2 separate people had called the inn asking questions. The marriage certificate had gotten us through the clause. Paper wasn't going to get us through what came next. Sylvie stood very still, with the kind of stillness that meant she was working the math on 6 problems at once. I picked up her folder from the table and held it out to her. You needed a fiancé by Friday, I said. It's Thursday, you have a fiancé. She looked at me. Then pack what you need, I said. You're not going home tonight. Sylvie showed up at my house at 8:30 with 1 rolling bag, a canvas tote so full it wouldn't zip, a leather satchel over her shoulder, and the look of a woman who had spent the day being Sylvie Beaumont and was running low on it. My house was the second to last one on a quiet street in the East End, close enough to the shop that I could hear the metal door rattle when the wind came in off the lake. It was a brick semi, original windows, pine floors, a kitchen, with a table big enough for plans or dinner, but not both at once, and a ceiling fan in the living room that I had never replaced, because it was original to the house and still worked fine. It just clicked. Sylvie stepped inside and looked around. It's smaller than I expected, she said. I set her bag by the stairs. Great start. She caught herself. That came out wrong. It came out honest. She exhaled. I meant, it's not what I pictured. What did you picture? I don't know, a contractor's place. She looked around again. It's actually... You can just stop there, I said. Guest rooms upstairs on the left. The window latch is stiff, lift before you turn. The shower takes about 40 seconds to warm up. There's a spare key on the hook by the back door that I'd like back at some point. She looked at me. You really know how to welcome someone. I'm new at the married part. She almost smiled. Not quite. That first week was like having a weather system move into the house. Sylvie had calls before 7 and again, at noon and again after dinner. Her name appeared in 2 more news stories that I found out about, because Hugo texted me links. Someone called the shop asking for a comment, and Mal answered and said, "Marsh Restoration, we don't do that," and hung up. At night, Sylvie worked at the kitchen table with papers in neat columns while I ate across from her out of containers from the Thai place on Division. She slept upstairs. I slept badly in my own room, and wasn't sure why. Nothing happened the way it probably looked from outside. There was no grand shift, no moment the walls came down. What there was, small adjustments. The way you share space with someone, and start to map their habits without meaning to. She learned the coffee maker needed. The lid held down for the first 3 seconds, or it would gurgle and spit grounds. I learned. She took her coffee black when she was focused, and added cream when she had already made the decision she was working toward. She started leaving her boots at the bottom of the stairs instead of by the door, which meant I stopped tripping over them and started expecting them there. I caught myself looking for them when I came in late. One night I came back from a site visit at 9 and found her standing on the bed in the guest room, fighting with the window. "What's happening?" I said from the doorway. "Your house is defeating me. You're turning it the wrong direction and I'm aware now." I reached past her and showed her. The latch released. The window swung open about 4 inches and let in cold air that smelled like the lake. Sylvie looked at it for a second, then at me. I was still leaning past her, not far, just close. "I'll fix it properly," I said and stepped back. "You said that 4 days ago. I've been publicly engaged." She laughed. Quiet and surprised, like it caught her off guard. Real in a way that the boardroom version of her was not. 3 days later, she came into the shop at 8:30 with a cardboard carrier from the coffee place on Princess Street. She had asked Mal the day before what everyone took, and she had written the names on the cups in small, careful handwriting, and she had got Hugo's spelled right, which Hugo mentioned twice. Pete took his cup and looked at the writing and looked at me. "She knows who I am." "She does, Reese," I said. Mal watched Sylvie crouch down to look at a mortise joint. One of the apprentices was practicing and say something I couldn't hear that made the kid nod and try again. Mal leaned close to me. "She's not what I thought. What did you think?" "Rich trouble. She is rich trouble." "Yeah," Mal said. "But she listens like it counts." 2 weeks after the boardroom, I took Sylvie through the Beaumont Arms. The inn had been closed for winter prep. The lobby had that particular quiet that old buildings have when the people are gone. Not empty exactly, more like held breath. The floors were worn softwood, the kind that record every step. The staircase was original. The handrail needed tightening, but the newel post was solid as the day it was set. Sylvie walked behind me and didn't say much. I showed her what I saw. The plaster work in this hall, water stain up in the corner, but it's old and dry. Someone fixed the source but left the cosmetics. That's actually a good sign, means the fix held. I ran my hand along the window casing in the dining room. These are old growth. You couldn't buy this wood now. Anybody tells you to pull them and put in new, they don't know what they're looking at. I crouched near the baseboard by the fireplace. Settlement crack here, superficial, follow the line, see how it stops? Building's not moving anymore. It settled and stayed. Sylvie stood in the center of the dining room and looked at the ceiling. "My father used to come here on Sunday mornings when I was small," she said. "He would sit at that table by the window and drink coffee and read the paper, and I would climb on the radiator until he told me to stop." She paused. I hadn't been back in 11 years either. Not because I didn't care, because it felt like, if I came, and it was still the way I remembered it, I'd have to admit how much it mattered. I looked at the ceiling she was looking at. Tin tiles. A century of paint, probably, still solid. Lazy restoration is just tearing something down with better lighting, I said. She turned to look at me. What? I said. My father would have liked that sentence. After that something shifted. Not in any way I could point to. She started flagging my emails before I sent them. Not rewriting, just. Too blunt here, they'll read this as aggressive or this part is good, move it earlier. I read her changes and they were right. Which I told her by not arguing. She noticed. I fixed the guest room window on a Tuesday. Sylvie stood beside me and handed me screws with the confidence of someone who had decided she was helping, regardless of whether she was useful. After, she opened and closed the window 4 times. I watched her do it. It works, I said. I'm aware, she said, and opened it again. The ring stayed on my finger. I told myself it was necessary. There were still cameras sometimes. Raymond had not stopped. Bernard forwarded us 2 more news items that were clearly sourced from inside the family. But there were nights with no one around and no reason to keep it on. And I kept it on. 6 weeks in, Raymond filed for an emergency trust review. The claim? The marriage was a transaction, not a genuine union. Sylvie had manufactured compliance with the clause through a paid arrangement. I was a prop in work boots. Sylvie arrived with Bernard and the documentation. I arrived from a site visit with dust on my jacket and my grandfather's ring on my hand, and Raymond saw it immediately. The questions were careful at first. Where did we live? How were finances handled? What did we intend going forward? Before Sylvie could answer the last one, I leaned forward. Raymond's lawyer looked at me. Mr. Marsh? That depends, I said, on whether Sylvie gives back my half of the kitchen table. I had a system. She moved in with 4 bags and a laptop, and now I can't find anything in my own house without asking her first. Nobody moved. Then, Mrs. Tremblay laughed. Quietly, but she laughed. Sylvie kept her eyes down, but I saw the corner of her mouth. It worked because it was true. Not in the way they wanted to measure it. Not in the way Raymond wanted to attack. True, in the way her reading glasses had ended up next to the coffee maker, because that was where she always took them off. True, in the way I knew she ate crackers for dinner, when she was too busy to cook. And I had started buying a specific brand without thinking about it. True in the way that when her car pulled up at night I noticed it, and something in me settled. The board did not give Raymond what he wanted, again. After, Sylvie and I ended up in a hallway outside the room while Bernard handled the clothes. No one else was there. Sylvie stood with her arms crossed, looking at nothing. You didn't have to make it sound true, she said. I didn't make it sound anything. She turned. There was no boardroom table between us. No one watching. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old building. Kieran, she said, softer than her usual register, and then she stepped forward and put her hand on my chest and kissed me. It wasn't for Raymond. What? It wasn't for Mrs. Tremblay. Nobody was watching. She kissed me because she wanted to, and that was the first time since the ladder and the car and the document I did not count as any kind of strategy. We drove back in my truck. She sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window, and neither of us performed anything. Every red light on Division felt like the city was taking its time on purpose. When we got home, she put her bag on the chair and stood in the kitchen, and I could feel that something had to be decided. We should be careful about what we do next, I said. She looked at me carefully. The courthouse got there first, I said. That doesn't mean we have to let it make the decision for us. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Don't be relieved yet. I'm not relieved, she said. I'm just tired of things being managed, including myself. We did it slowly after that. The way things actually work when they're real. She kept the guest room for a while longer. I kept making bad coffee. She kept editing my emails, and I kept pretending I was going to push back on her changes and never did. But now, when she walked past the chair I was sitting in, her hand brushed my shoulder. When I came in late, she looked up from the table in the way that meant she'd been listening for the door and didn't want to admit it. Some nights we sat on the back step after dinner and watched the yard go dark. The shop was quiet across the lane. Kingston in November sounds like nothing much. The lake doing its thing. The odd car. And it turned out that was enough. Raymond made 2 more moves in the weeks after. They got smaller. The board had seen enough. The trust language was clear. The marriage was standing. The clause was satisfied. Sylvie had the votes she needed. Beaumont Properties held together. The bookshop stayed. The music school stayed. The inn stayed off Raymond's spreadsheet. I was home from a job in Bath, one Friday evening, and came in to find Sylvie at the kitchen table. No laptop, no work call, no stacked papers, just one thin folder and the reading glasses beside the coffee maker. Her face was calm in the way I had learned to recognize as its own kind of weather. "What's that?" I said. She pushed the folder across the table. Annulment documents, the Vital Statistics Act, everything clean and labeled. She had changed out of her work clothes into jeans and an old Carleton University hoodie she had found in the closet that had probably been there since the previous tenant. She had tied her hair back and her face was very still. "Bernard reviewed it," she said. "I also had Ms. Park look at it independently. Your company, your house, your grandfather's house on Berry Street, your tools. Everything is completely untouched. No penalty, no public statement, nothing that follows you. You rehearsed that." "Yes. How many times?" "Too many." She folded her hands on the table. "The clause has expired. The trust review failed. Raymond has no stronger ground to stand on. The board is stable. You did what I asked. You did more than I asked. And I didn't have the right to ask most of it." She stopped. "I don't want you staying because you're the kind of man who finishes what he starts, and you've decided this counts." I looked at the folder. The ceiling fan clicked above us. "Sylvie." "I mean it," she said quietly. "I don't want you in something because you felt responsible for seeing it through. That's not why I want you here." That was the realest thing she had said since the hallway. I sat down across from her. "You showed up on my job site," I said, "and asked me what I wanted. Before I said yes to anything. You didn't assume." She looked at me. "So, I'll tell you what I want." I put my hand flat on the folder and slid it back toward her. "I don't want my half of the kitchen table back. I don't want the guest room empty. I don't want to be the only one who knows the coffee maker trick. I don't want to hear about the Beaumont arms from somebody else and wonder what you thought of the tin ceiling. I don't want to take this ring off and act like it was just something we used to get past a deadline." Her eyes went bright. She didn't look away. "I was trying to be fair to you," she said. "I know." I leaned back in the chair. "You had a quieter life before this. Write in the comments. Was Sylvie right to give me a way out? Or should she have trusted that I already knew what I was choosing?" "I had a quieter life," I said. "I didn't say a better one." She looked at the folder between us. Then she put her hand on it and moved it off the table entirely. Into her lap, like it had worn out its welcome. "I don't want out either," she said. It wasn't a declaration. It was just the truth. The kind that doesn't need the room to be different, or the moment to be more than it is. My kitchen table with the rings in the wood. The fan clicking overhead. The lake doing its thing somewhere past the yard. The annulment never got filed. In the spring, Sylvie moved the rest of her things in. Not all at once. Over a few weekends, a box at a time, the way sensible people do things they intend to keep. Her reading glasses joined mine by the coffee maker. Her boots took the left side of the mat by the back door and stayed there. The Beaumont Arms restoration started in April. My company got the contract, which I had not asked for, and Sylvie had not offered until Mrs. Tremblay suggested an open bid process, and mine came in strongest. Mal ran the first 2 weeks on site while I finished the job on Young Street. Hugo worked the inn all summer and learned more about limestone in 4 months than most people learn in a career. We had a proper ceremony the following autumn in the dining room of the Beaumont Arms, the one with the old growth window casings and the good ceiling. It was small. Mal stood near the front and did not cry. Technically, though her eyes were not dry, Hugo wore a blazer over his work shirt and looked genuinely pleased with himself. Mrs. Tremblay came and brought a card that said nothing sentimental, but was nonetheless. Bernard was there too, looking, for the first time, like he was not tracking a deadline. Raymond was not invited. Sylvie walked in wearing something simple. No cream coat, no careful expression. Just herself. She looked at me across the room, and I thought about the ladder and the town car and the 40 seconds it had taken me to climb down and say all right. When it came time for the rings, I used my grandfather's again. My grandmother's went on Sylvie's hand. I had found it in the same drawer, the same top drawer of the workbench, 3 weeks before, and when I held it up beside his, she had gone very quiet. "Are you sure?" she asked. "He would have been sure," I said. After, we stood near the window in the dining room, while the room filled with voices, and someone put music at something with a fiddle in it that Mal had probably arranged. The October light came in at the angle that made the old wood floors look like they were lit from inside. Sylvie leaned into my side. Outside, the street was doing what Kingston streets do in October. Leaves moving, people walking, the ordinary life of a city that mostly stays itself. "You know," she said. "When I drove up to that house on Young Street, I had a whole speech prepared. What happened to it? You were up a ladder covered in paint, and you looked annoyed before I'd said a word." She paused. I decided direct was safer. I looked down at her. "I need a fiancé by Friday is your version of direct?" It worked. It had. That was the strange, unlikely, completely specific truth of it. She had shown up to a job site I happened to be on, with a problem I happened to understand, looking for a person I happened to be. And years later, when people asked how we met, she always answered the same way. "I needed a fiancé by Friday," she'd say, and glance at me. And I would tell them the rest.